Close your eyes for a second and picture yourself in the mid-1990s. The air is thick with change. The internet is dial-up and screeching. The soundtrack of the era is blasting from Walkmans. And the world is being mesmerized by films like Jurassic Park, Titanic, and The Matrix. Culture was exploding in every direction, and cars were no different. This was an era where automotive engineers were less restricted, more daring, and sometimes even reckless in their pursuit of glory. And right in the middle of this frenzy, Porsche looked at the rules of motorsport and thought, let's bend them so hard they almost break. What they created wasn't just a car. It was a Le Mans prototype you could drive on the street. A spaceship that somehow wore a license plate. This is not Hollywood fantasy. It's not a deleted scene from Fast and Furious. This is real history. And today, we're diving deep into the story of the Porsche 911 GT1 Strassenversion, the 90s race car built for the road. This script isn't just about numbers and engineering. No, this is about myth-making. About how one of the most insane cars ever built came into existence because of a simple rule in motorsport. It's about why Porsche, already a legend in endurance racing, decided to flex harder than anyone else. It's about an era of cars that makes today's hypercars look almost tame. Buckle up, because this isn't just a car story. This is cinema on wheels. Now, let's begin. The Porsche 911 GT1 Strassenversion was born from necessity. The FIA's rules for GT1 racing in the 1990s were clear. If you wanted to run a car at Le Mans, you had to homologate it. That meant you had to build a handful of road-going versions, proof that your race car wasn't just a fantasy, but something vaguely tethered to reality. Most manufacturers treated this as a bureaucratic nuisance. They'd slap together a barely legal version of their race car, check the box, and move on. But Porsche decided to take the rulebook and make art with it. When you first see the GT1 Strassenversion, it's like stepping into a parallel universe. Yes, it has hints of the Porsche 911 DNA headlights that resemble the 993 generation, a roofline that nods politely to its heritage. But that's where the similarities end. This isn't a 911 that went to the gym. This is a 911 that joined the Avengers. It looks like the Batmobile's European cousin, with curves, scoops, and wings that scream speed even when it's standing. Still, to the untrained eye, it might look alien, and in many ways, it is. Let's not forget, the Strassenversion part of its name literally means street version in German. That's almost a joke in itself, because while you could technically drive this thing on public roads, it was like bringing a flamethrower to a birthday party. Sure, it's allowed, but nobody's really ready for it. Underneath its carbon fiber body sat a monster, a 3.2-liter twin-turbo flat-six engine. In road trim, it made around 544 horsepower. By today's standards, where Teslas can crack 1,000 horsepower, that number might sound modest, but in 1997, that was borderline obscene. More importantly, this engine wasn't some massaged road car unit. It was lifted straight from Porsche's endurance racing program, a direct descendant of the legendary 962C. Imagine Bruce Wayne deciding to take the Batmobile out for coffee. That's the level of absurdity we're dealing with here. 0 to 60. Just 3.6 seconds. Top speed. Around 191 miles per hour. Again, keep the timeline in mind. The McLaren F1, considered the ultimate road car of the era, was the only other machine playing in this kind of territory. Ferrari's flagship F50 looked like a toy. Next to it, the Strassenversion wasn't just fast, It was feral. It was a predator built for one environment, the racetrack, but forced to adapt, however reluctantly, to the road. And yet, that's exactly what makes it so captivating. The GT1 Strassenversion wasn't refined. It wasn't luxurious. It didn't care about your comfort. Its suspension would rattle your bones. Its turbochargers would lag and then punch you in the chest. And its aerodynamics meant that at highway speeds, it felt less like a car and more like a jet on the runway. Driving one wasn't a commute. It was a mission. This car wasn't just competing with physics. It was competing with culture itself. If you dropped it into a James Bond film, nobody would blink. It looked like it could outrun Pierce Brosnan's Aston Martin in GoldenEye, or shred through the Matrix's freeway chase scene with ease. Pop culture almost feels incomplete without the GT1, because it was born with that larger-than-life aura. It was a car made for legends, not errands. And speaking of legends, let's talk about rarity. Depending on which records you believe, Porsche only built around 20 of these Strassenversion models. That's it. 20. For perspective, that makes it rarer than most Hollywood props. Imagine having a screen-used lightsaber from Star Wars. Now imagine that lightsaber could hit 190 miles per hour and cost millions. That's what owning a GT1 Strassenversion is like. Collectors treat them like holy relics. Whenever one shows up at auction, the car world collectively loses its mind. Prices shoot into the multi-million-dollar range, and for good reason. This isn't just a piece of Porsche history. It's a piece of motorsport history. It's a time capsule from an era when manufacturers were still allowed to be crazy, when rules forced creativity instead of restricting it. Now, to truly understand why this car matters, we need to talk about context. Le Mans in the 1990s was the ultimate battleground. Mercedes, Toyota, McLaren, and Porsche were all vying for dominance. The GT1 category became a war zone where only the most radical machines could survive. Porsche knew they couldn't just rely on the traditional 911 platform. They had to create something new, something that looked like a 911 but fought like a prototype. The result was the GT1 Dot, and here's where Porsche's genius really shines. They didn't just build a race car and then half-heartedly adapt it for the road. No, they engineered the GT1 from the ground up with both purposes in mind. The race car and the road car were siblings, born together, sharing DNA but living in different worlds. The Strassenversion wasn't an afterthought. It was part of the plan. And that makes it fundamentally different from the homologation specials of other brands. Imagine it this way. Most companies built race cars and then threw a trench coat on them so they could sneak past the rules as road cars. Porsche, on the other hand, built a superhero suit and said, "Yeah, this guy can attend a dinner party if you really want." And what a suit it was. The design language of the GT1 is timeless. The long-tail aerodynamics, the flared arches, the giant rear wing, all of it screamed purpose. Yet somehow, it also screamed beauty. It was a car that looked dangerous and elegant at the same time, like a great white shark in a tuxedo. Driving one on the street must have felt like living. In a movie, people would stop, stare, and probably question reality itself. It wasn't a car you could blend in with, even if you wanted to. You'd pull up to a red light, and suddenly you're not just part of traffic, you're the main character. Everyone else is background actors. The GT1 made sure of it. But let's pause for a second. Because, while all this sounds romantic, owning one was a nightmare. Maintenance was sky high. Parts were rare. And unless you lived next to the Nürburgring, you could never truly stretch its legs. It was a car that demanded respect, attention, and frankly, a bit of masochism. And yet, isn't that what makes legends? They're not easy, they're not convenient, they're extreme, they're unforgettable. Halfway through our story, we've established the legend, the rarity, and the insanity of the Porsche 911 GT1 Strassenversion. But there's still so much more to uncover. Its rivals, its racing triumphs and failures, its place in the 90s hypercar arms race, and the way it still haunts collectors and enthusiasts today. Picking up where we left off, the Porsche 911 GT1 Strassenversion doesn't exist in isolation. To understand its full impact, we need to look at the battlefield it was born into. The raging hypercar wars of the 1990s. This wasn't just Porsche flexing its muscles. This was part of a global arms race, one that saw manufacturers unleashing some of the wildest machines ever conceived. Mick, Laren, had already shocked the world with the F1 in 1992. Gordon Murray's masterpiece was a road car. First, but its DNA was pure racing. The McLaren F1 GTR would go on to win Le Mans in 1995, a victory that sent shockwaves through Stuttgart. Porsche couldn't just stand by and let the British steal their thunder. The GT1 was their counterattack. But here's the kicker. Whereas the McLaren was a road car turned racer, the Porsche was a race car turned road car. Two opposite philosophies, clashing on the same tarmac. Then there was Mercedes-Benz, their weapon. The CLK GTR. If the Porsche GT1 looked like a shark in a tuxedo, the CLK GTR looked like a German assassin in a tailored suit, built for the same homologation reasons. Mercedes created just over 24 road versions, each one as terrifying as the Porsche, but with a slightly different flavor. Where the Porsche had its flat-six howl, the Mercedes had a thunderous V12. If the GT1 was the Matrix, the CLK GTR was the Terminator. Relentless, mechanical, unstoppable. And let's not forget Toyota's GT1. This was Japan's attempt at bending the rules in their favor. The road version of the GT1 was so extreme that only 2 or 3 were ever built. And even then, one was rumored to be used as a press mule more than a true street car. Still, it proves the point. The 90s were wild. Manufacturers were willing to dance on the knife's edge of regulations just to prove who had the ultimate machine. In this war of titans, Porsche's GT1 held its own. On the racetrack, the GT1 had mixed success. It didn't win at Le Mans in 1996 or 1997, losing to McLaren and later to TWRN Jaguars and Mercedes. But Porsche wasn't done. In 1998, with the evolution of the GT1 98, they finally claimed overall victory at Le Mans, cementing their dominance once again. That victory was directly tied to the DNA of the Strassenversion. The road car may have been a technicality, but it was also the foundation for Porsche's racing glory. Driving enthusiasts who've had the rare chance to pilot a GT1 Strassenversion describe it as a surreal experience. The seating position is low and purposeful, with thin padding that reminds you comfort was never part of the mission. Visibility is compromised, road noise is deafening, and the clutch feels like it was designed for bodybuilders. But when you push the throttle and feel those twin turbos spool, time bends. It's like stepping through a wormhole into another reality, one where physics exists only to be challenged. Culturally, the GT1 is still the stuff of legend. Imagine if Top Gear's Golden Trio had ever gotten their hands on one, Clarkson would have been screaming, "This is insane," while Hammond tried to wrestle it around a corner, and May calmly pointed out how the aero worked at high speeds. Sadly, that never happened, but in our collective imagination, it feels like it should have. The GT1 deserved its pop culture spotlight, the way the DeLorean had in Back to the Future. It was that kind of car, a machine that transcends car culture and enters the realm of myth. And then there's the collector world. Today, if you want to buy a GT1 Strassenversion, you better be prepared to empty your vault. Recent auction prices have exceeded $10 million, with some predicting the next one to cross the block could hit $15 million or more. For comparison, that's Bugatti La Vorta Noir money. But unlike modern hypercars, the GT1 doesn't just represent performance or luxury. It represents rebellion. It's a tangible artifact from a time when manufacturers bent reality to win. What's fascinating is how modern hypercars owe a debt to the GT1. Take the Porsche 918 Spider, for instance. Its hybrid wizardry and Nürburgring lap records are incredible. But its philosophy, race car technology, distilled into a road-legal package, was pioneered decades earlier by the GT1. The same can be said for today's track-focused specials. From the McLaren Senna to the AMG 1, they all follow the trail blazed by Porsche's audacity in the 1990s, and yet the GT1 remains untouchable in its uniqueness. It wasn't a hypercar designed for billionaire garages. It wasn't a flex for social media clout. It existed for one reason: to dominate Le Mans. Everything else, the rarity, the legend, the auction prices, was a side effect. OUTROSO here. We are standing at the end of a story that feels more like a blockbuster movie than a chapter of automotive history. The Porsche 911 GT1 Strassenversion wasn't supposed to exist. It was a loophole, a necessity, a bureaucratic afterthought. And yet, it became one of the most legendary cars of all time. A car that blurred the line between fantasy and reality. A car that made the outrageous possible. Think about it. In an age before CGI dominated Hollywood, Porsche gave us a real-life superhero machine. It could have been cast in The Dark Knight, outrun velociraptors in Jurassic Park, or dodged bullets in The Matrix. But instead, it roared down real highways, carrying real license plates, shocking anyone lucky enough to witness it. The GT1 Strassenversion isn't just a car. It's a symbol of freedom, creativity, and a little bit of madness. It represents a moment in time when engineers dreamed bigger than rules, when passion triumphed over practicality, and when legends weren't just imagined, they were built. And now, decades later, we still can't stop talking about it. That's the mark of true greatness. Not the lap times, not the horsepower figures, but the way it makes us feel, inspired, awestruck, a little bit crazy so. If you enjoyed this journey into Porsche's wildest creation, hit that like button, subscribe for more stories of automotive legends, and tell us in the comments, if someone handed you the keys to a GT1 Strassenversion, what would you do? Would you take it to the track, cruise through the city, or simply park it in your living room like a piece of art? Because that's what this car is. Art. Loud, fast, terrifying, beautiful art. Until next time, keep dreaming, keep driving, and remember, legends aren't born, they're engineered.